When I first turned the key at midnight, something in the hallway smiled at me, but it wasn't me. I should say up front that I wanted this house. I'd saved for years, signed the papers with shaking hands, and told myself the creaks and the thin paint were all part of the charm. It was an old Victorian with a sagging porch and the kind of narrow windows that make rooms look like they're holding their breath. The previous owner, an older woman whose name barely stuck in my memory, left the town a rumor and a set of keys. The realtor called her private. I called the place mine. The first days were paint and boxes and an odd comfort, the space folding around me like a coat. I learned the sound of the house, how the radiators sighed in the morning, how the stairwell hummed when the afternoon sun warmed the old boards. There was a small closet beneath the stairs where I kept the vacuum and a stack of boxes labeled kitchen. At night, I would fall asleep to the distant rattle of traffic and the house settling into itself. The first thing that made my stomach tighten was scent. You get used to a home smelling like you: coffee, soap, the laundry detergent you favor. One morning, months after I moved in, I woke to a thin floral perfume drifting down the hall. Not mine, not anything I owned. It was clean and sharp like handkerchiefs stored in cedar, and for a moment I smiled, imagining a neighbor's window open somewhere. When I went to the hall, it evaporated like steam. But then I found the closet door, which I had left locked, slightly ajar. Small things began to surrender their innocence. A plate I had put on the counter the night before was gone, cleaned and stacked in the sink. A photograph from the mantel, me smiling at the beach, was face down on the floor. A single pair of slippers I keep by the bed had been moved, perfectly aligned, at the base of the stairs. The house has a way of doing minor domestic cruelties. At first, I blamed my exhaustion, the way memory blurs when you carry too many boxes. I noticed marks on the back of the pantry door, faint scratches, like nails catching on wood. I chalked them up to mice or careless movers until I found dark smudges on the inside of my bedroom window at eye level. They were not fingerprints so much as the outline of a face pressed close enough to fog the glass. I started leaving the light on in the hall. Night made the house run its hands along me. Sounds that had been background noise sharpened into rhythms, a soft scraping in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, the hollow thump of something too large to be a rat settling into the floor above, the whisper of fabric in the closet beneath the stairs. Once, near dawn, I woke to the sensation of breath against my ear, thinner than wind, warmer than the night air, and the unmistakable scent of that perfume. I lay rigid, listening. Nothing more followed. I began to find things intentionally placed. 3 teaspoons lined by the stove, the lid of a jar set at an angle on a shelf, a single wilted daisy on the mat by the door. They read like messages, polite and precise, as if someone practiced domesticity inside my home when I was not looking. I told myself stories about old habits and forgetfulness. I told myself the house would accept me in time. But there are other proofs besides the objects. There is the awareness that you are being watched in spaces that should be empty. One night, I stood at the top of the stairs and felt a presence on the landing below, so close I could hear the thread of breath through the plaster. I told myself to call out, to demand whatever right I had. My throat closed. I walked down, each step loud, and the hallway was empty except for the shadow of the doorway and a smile that was not mine left smudged on the glass. The house stopped pretending to be polite. It became deliberate. At first, the interruptions were small and private. A tea kettle boiled, though I hadn't touched it, a slow, steady tapping from the walls like someone practicing Morse. Then the house began returning things to me altered, as if someone had been inside, curating my life. A sweater I hadn't worn in years was folded on my chair exactly the way I remembered my mother folding things. A mug, my favorite one with a chipped rim, appeared on the bedside table with a faint lipstick stain I had not left. The air would thicken with that floral perfume, as if someone had walked by carrying a bouquet of old roses, and then it would disappear, leaving behind the metallic tang of copper and a low, satisfied hum. I started leaving little cameras, cheap, animal-level devices, hidden in corners. For 2 nights, they recorded nothing but darkness and the settling sighs of an empty house. On the third morning, I watched footage that unstitched my sleep into something flayed and raw. A woman moving through my rooms at 3 in the morning like a current. She never turned to the camera. She handled my things with hands that were careful to be invisible. She straightened a picture, brushed crumbs from a countertop, paused at my bedroom door, hovered, and for a breath, she stood in the light as if trying to learn my shape. Then she slipped under the stairs, and the footage ended with a whisper I felt in my bones. The next day, I found a note tucked under the oven door. "You should have asked." The handwriting was shaky and precise, ink smudged in places like someone had cried and still held a pen. My name appeared in the margins of an old house ledger I found hidden behind a loose board in the guest room, dates of days I'd lived there before I bought it. The ledger cataloged things she had done for the place, mended the curtains, repainted the trim, lined drawers with tissue. Next to one entry were words that made my stomach drop. He will come, and he will never leave. The dates stretched backward, months before my offer was even accepted. I stopped leaving the house alone. I began checking locks twice, 3 times, bolting doors with a ritualistic care that felt both ridiculous and necessary. Locks were undone the next morning. The hall light, set on a timer, would flicker and then go out, even though the breaker showed no fault. Once, in the small hours, I heard walking in the attic, a deliberate, heavy shuffle like someone pacing a map into their memory. I climbed the ladder in slippers and found, beneath a collapsed patch of insulation, a narrow passageway leading along the eaves. Inside, in a small hollow she had carved, were remnants: a sedate cup, a faded shawl, a stack of Polaroids of my face sleeping. She had taken pictures of me while I slept. Some were labeled with dates. Some had notes. "He looked so peaceful. Not his fault. Soon." I began to misplace hours. I would lose whole mornings, come to with my clothes on the floor and the television static still warm in the background, and a faint smell of perfume clinging to the collar of my shirt. Friends told me I looked drawn, suggested doctor's visits or therapy. I went once. The doctor's eyes skimmed my face, then my birth certificate, and called it exhaustion. The police were kinder than I expected, but helpless. No forced entry, no signs of a break-in, no DNA under the fingernails of a doorframe. To them, I was a man with an overactive imagination. Then came the night that tore the polite veneer clean off. I woke to the house humming a song I had never heard, something low and thin, like a lullaby someone remembers wrong. The perfume pressed against my face. The closet beneath the stairs opened, not ajar, but pulled back like a curtain, and from the dark came a voice that sounded like every neighbor's washer-dryer, and the whisper of pages turning. It said, simply and terribly, "You finally noticed." When the voice said, "You finally noticed," the sound folded the room into a small, hot sphere. My heart did the stupid animal thing, lurch, seize, then hammer, while the perfume thickened like fog. I stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, every muscle wound tight as wire, and listened as the house exhaled the slow, domestic noises that had become a language between us. The refrigerator's distant click, the clock's patient tick, the soft patter of something moving inside the walls. I went for the closet beneath the stairs because it was the place that owned the quietest darkness. The light from my phone was a small, obscene thing in the black. Inside, beyond the coats and the vacuum, there was a narrow crawl space, no bigger than a child's hiding place, that I had seen in the attic after I followed the insulation. Tonight, a thin lamp glowed there, ancient and yellow, and when I put my face close enough, I could make out a woman sitting cross-legged on a mat. She looked like a thing one might press from memory, skin too pale, nails clipped to precise crescents, hair combed but not arranged. Her eyes were blunt and bright as coins. When she smiled, it was not the grin of malice, so much as the contentment of someone who had arranged the world to their liking. "You should have been kinder to the wallpaper," she said, and the voice held no surprise, only the tired certainty of things returning to their place. She had a small book in her lap, pages filled with notes, times, dates, lists of things she'd done. I recognized my handwriting in a shock of ink, my signature from a form I had signed at the closing. How had it appeared here? I tried to speak, to demand explanation, to call the police, but my mouth made no words that sounded like commands. My voice came out thin. She cocked her head like someone listening for a song to finish. "You move into a life and don't close the doors," she said. "You leave crumbs, you forget the smells. The house remembers, the house waits." She patted the mat beside her with a careful politeness. "Sit, we will be comfortable." I did not sit. I stepped back, and the lamp's light seemed to deepen rather than fade. It revealed a wall of photographs behind her, Polaroids of the living room, the stairs, my bedroom. One large image was especially focused, a photo of me asleep on the couch, face slack, mouth open. There was a small smear of something on the pillow. My knees went weak. I tasted iron. I lunged for the phone, but my hand brushed the mat, and it was as if I touched a pulse. The woman laughed then, not cruel but absolute, and from somewhere deeper inside the house, there came the scrape of a chair being pushed back. The front door was thrown open with a soft, deliberate force. A breeze, cold and smelling faintly of lavender and old books, came through the gap and carried with it the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow, familiar, like someone who had been coming home for a very long time. I ran for the door. The hallway elongated and folded like a film reel. Rooms I knew became strange. The mirror in the foyer reflected a man with my face, but not my eyes, his pupils dull, as if coated in something dark. I fumbled the latch. The key would not turn. I set the shoulder to the door and shoved until my ribs burned. From the other side of the house came a gentle humming, a lullaby that threaded itself through the bones of the building and into mine. It sounded like the voice of the woman, like the house itself. And with each note, I felt something inside me soften, slip. A silhouette stood on the porch through the rain-streaked glass, small, compact, certain. For an instant, I thought help had come. Then the figure lifted a hand to the knob, and in the way the world sometimes explains impossible things with banal motion, the knob turned on its own. The door opened. I stepped back, the hallway swallowing my breath. The woman under the stairs rose, and with a practiced gentleness, folded the mat and placed it into a small wooden box. She set the box beside the door like one places a gift. Her eyes found mine. They were not pleading. They were tidy. "Stay," she whispered, as if offering tea. I did not move fast enough. She did not need to touch me to cross the distance. The house did the rest. My limbs went heavy, my tongue thick as cloth. I remember the sound of the latch closing, the soft click of a home securing itself. I remember the light dimming to the exact hue of sleep. Later, if later exists, I found more photos in the attic. There were new ones, taken after that night, with dates scrawled in the margins. In each, I looked smaller, softer at the edges, smiling in that way people do when someone else chooses their world. I still leave the hall light on. I still smell the perfume sometimes in the morning, like a reminder someone has set out for me. I tell myself I will leave. I practice standing at the door and turning the knob. But in the quiet hours, when the house settles and the perfume moves like a ghost around my neck, I hear her humming, and I remember the safe, exact way she folded the mat. I closed the door, and something smiled from the other side.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.